Okay. This is take 2. Oh my goodness. We're trying this again. Hello to all of you. Ah, yes! Now I can see people. This is great. Hi, Erin. Welcome. Okay, so also if hi Roman. You guys, if you could get the word out to some other people, I think you have to log in with a different email to watch the video, so you can't use your Saugus one. Um, yes, so I think that's what some people are running into, is they're trying to use their. Uh, I have to what? I don't understand. I have to watch the live stream. You guys can see, right? I have to sub to watch the live stream. Subscribe! Wow, you guys can tell how often I've done this. This is the first time I've done this. How funny. Let me tell Mrs. Tomei really quick. Oh my goodness. So silly. You guys have a lot more knowledge of this whole YouTube thing than I do, I think. But I like that I can actually like see the comments now. That's nice. Um, and hello, everyone. It's so fun to see you here. We got 5 people now, which is more than what we had before. And now Mrs. Tomei can't see the live stream. Oh, this is funny. Hello. And then turn on. Hi, Dylan. This is so funny. I'm trying to help Mrs. Tomei get on. I like that I can see you guys in the comments now. Before, I felt like I was just talking to no one. And now we have 9 people. People are figuring it out. That's awesome. That's so exciting. Let's get to 1,000 likes. Oh my goodness. I think if we could get this video to 5 likes, I would be happy. I'm not that famous. We are going to be famous. Maybe one day we will all be famous. You guys are famous to me. I had 5 likes? Oh, then I'm content. Okay, Mrs. Tomei is still trying to figure out how to get on. We have 9 people now. This is a little weird because I don't really know what to say. 15 likes, that's a good goal. And 10 people. Mrs. Tomei's in the house! She made it! I feel like I should have some sort of story to tell you while we're waiting for some more people, but I don't know if I have a story. 1 million likes. Whoa, that's too many, I think. Well, this is my first YouTube Live, and I'm excited. Ah, there's Mrs. Tomei. They're trying to get me to 1 million likes and some subs, as I learned is the abbreviation for subscribers. Okay, well, I wanna make sure that everyone who's coming is gonna get here. So maybe I'll give them, like, 2 more minutes, and then we'll start. But this is really my favorite chapter of the book, you guys, I think. This one, and then there's one at the end that I love. Hi, Dylan. I don't know who all these people are. I see Aaron, and I know Joshua's here, and Roman is here. Mrs. Tomei is here. Jacob! Hi, Jacob! Oh, this is fun. Look at us being all technologically advanced. And Marcus! Hi, Marcus! This is fun. This is fun. We should do this more often. What if I started reading you guys a different book just for fun and I did it on YouTube Live? That might be fun. 50,000 likes and 1 million subscribers. Holy moly. I don't know if we can do that. Yeah, maybe we'll have to bring it up in class tomorrow and see how many people would be game for that. I would. I know I would. Oh, we were at 12 and now we're back down to 11. Okay. I think we should start. And then people who can come in. And we'll just do it. All right. Let's get cracking. So, we're reading chapter 4 of the book. And I don't have to do a lot of review because we literally just read chapter 3. But chapter 4 is from the perspective of Aaron. And you guys are going to be mind blown. So, I'll stop when we get to the part that I think you guys are going to be mind blown at. You can put some comments. Okay? All right. Chapter 4, Aaron Archer, Dolly Madison Middle School, Westchester County, Pennsylvania. A few mornings after the Great Quizmaster's catastrophe, which is what people had started calling it when they thought I wasn't listening, Mrs. Dunaway peered at me through her glasses while she took attendance. After Xavier Zug answered, "Present," she announced, "Poetry recitations." After the moaning died down, Mrs. Dunaway called, "Aaron Archer, please present the poem I asked you to memorize." I hadn't exactly memorized my poem the way everybody else memorizes poems, by sitting on the edge of my bed, saying it 20 times out loud, and hoping for the best. Since, like I mentioned, every word I've ever laid eyes on has automatically filed away on my hard drive. There are poems in there about lovely trees and boys on burning decks and clouds and even one about vast and trunkless legs of stone. But out of all of the poems in the world, the one Mrs. Dunaway had asked me to recite was one so crazy it hardly seemed like a poem at all. The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. "Excellent," said Mrs. Dunaway after I was done. I told her thanks and headed for my seat. "Wait," said Mrs. Dunaway. "I've got a question." "How much is so much?" she asked. "How much is," I began. "I thought we were just supposed to recite a poem." "Some of us are reciting," replied Mrs. Dunaway, "and some of us are reciting and then answering questions." "Okay, Mrs. Dunaway," I said. "How much is so much?" she repeated. I mentally scanned the author biography underneath the poem. William Carlos Williams has long been known as a revolutionary figure in American poetry. I read off the page in my mind. Yet, unlike other poets of his time who pursued exotic lives and difficult poetic themes, William lived in Rutherford, New Jersey. "No, Aaron," Mrs. Dunaway interrupted. "Perhaps you didn't understand the question." I didn't understand the question. Or the chickens. I glanced around at the class. They didn't seem to understand any of it either. Hardy shrugged his shoulders at me, and Andrea had a little crease of confusion on her head. Mrs. Dunaway, her eyes focused on me like lasers. "I mean," she explained, "if William Carlos Williams thinks that so much depends on a red wheelbarrow, then how much does he think depends on a red wheelbarrow?" "I get it," I said. I didn't get it. "Close your eyes," Mrs. Dunaway suggested. She wore the same expression she'd had when I tanked in the Quizmaster's final. Concerned, but curious. "What is your red wheelbarrow? Where are your white chickens?" Does that sound familiar to anyone? Maybe. Like we've been reading this poem since the beginning of our Love That Dog book for a reason. Hee hee hee. And did those questions sound familiar? Didn't I ask you? How much is so much? What is your red wheelbarrow? What is your white chickens? Ah, it's like I had this all planned out or something. I said, everybody in the whole room thought I knew everything in the world, with the possible exception of how King George felt about his American subjects in 1775. The problem was, all I really knew was a ton of facts. Sure, I thought about other stuff, maybe not chickens or wheelbarrows, but once in a while I like to think about what depends on what. Like how my neighbor Mrs. Larson depends on her 6 cats, which is why I help her remember when it's time to give each individual one its worm pill. Needless to say, though, I never got as far as old William Carlos Williams. I never got to chickens and wheelbarrows. But since I had the feeling Mrs. Dunaway was trying to help, I tried to follow her advice about William Carlos. I closed my eyes. Look at the poem, she suggested. Really look. I looked. What do you see? Asked Mrs. Dunaway. Words, I said. On a page? I could even visualize the numbers at the bottom and the fold in the corner of the dusty yellow paper where my mom had turned it down to mark her place in the poetry book. Focus, prodded Mrs. Dunaway, on the colors in the poem, red and white. And why does the poet mention the rain? What does it all look like, Erin? Can you give me a hint, Mrs. Dunaway? I asked. What's the answer? Did William Carlos Williams ever tell anybody? I'm not sure William Carlos Williams knew the answer, said Mrs. Dunaway. But you do. You just don't know you do. Slowly, I tried to visualize the water drops glistening on the red paint after a huge storm, and the clean white of the feathers, and somewhere in a far corner of my mind, I started to understand that this wasn't about chickens and farm tools. William Carlos Williams was telling me something more than that. He'd hidden another idea under his words. William Carlos Williams was telling me that sometimes the plainest things can be very, very. The sound of toe tapping invaded my thoughts. I opened my eyes. Principal Duplessis loomed in the doorway, bald as a billiard ball, a FedEx box jammed under his arm. Unfortunately, a razor mishap had obliterated his eyebrows along with his hair. Although Mrs. Dunaway and most of my friends had gotten over the great Quizmaster's catastrophe, he hadn't. Not even close. And when Principal Duplessis fell into a bad mood, for instance, the kind of mood he might slip into after watching his Quizmasters team blow its big chance at a state title, and subsequently seeing a bald head and missing eyebrows to remind him of this decade to remind him of this debacle every time he looked in the mirror, he took his frustrations out on the person he considered responsible, the coach, Mrs. Dunaway. He barked. A word? I'm teaching, replied Mrs. Dunaway without a glance in his direction. Mrs. Dunaway, he repeated, a word. This time it wasn't a request. Mrs. Dunaway joined him in the hall. The principal didn't scream or throw things like he used to when he was the basketball coach and somebody missed a layup, but he was still plenty mad. We could hear every word he said out there. Creativity, inspiration, imagination, sputtered Principal Duplessis. That's 3 words, pointed out Mrs. Dunaway. Whatever, muttered Principal Duplessis. They aren't what I came to talk about. What did you come to talk about? Asked Mrs. Dunaway. The Central Standards exam, exploded Principal Duplessis. 4 words, observed Mrs. Dunaway. 4 very important words when it comes to the reputation of Dolly Madison Middle School, replied Principal Duplessis, which is in tatters right now thanks to your Quizmaster's performance. How am I supposed to win Principal of the Year with performances like that? Mrs. Dunaway raised one eyebrow. He pointed at a number on the floor in front of her door. He had painted numbers like this outside a few classrooms around the school. They showed everybody how deficient each homeroom teacher had been on this Central Standards practice exam, and on which part Mrs. Dunaway was a -2 language arts, which was kind of a problem since she was supposed to be teaching us language arts in her homeroom. So just to recap that, they get like scores on this exam, and sorry, the washing machine downstairs is going crazy. But they are rating the teachers based on how well they do at teaching, and she has a -2 in front of her classroom. You've got 2 language arts deficiency points, and you're asking the one student in your class who's actually good at the Central Standards exam about chickens? Cried Principal Duplessis. I'm quite proud of that question, replied Mrs. Dunaway. I thought it up just for Erin. It's not the right kind of question, spluttered the principal. What kind of question, asked Mrs. Dunaway, is the right kind of question? This kind, snapped Principal Duplessis. He yanked the FedEx box out from under his arm, ripped off the label that said, "Do not open until June 2nd," dug out a Central Standards exam question booklet, sliced off the little round seal with his thumbnail, which I'm pretty sure broke about 100 rules, and opened it to page 1. He read, "Identify the coordinating conjunction in the following sentence. Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life, or whether that station will be held by anybody else, these pages must show A, whether, B, or, C, to, D, held." Well, he demanded, glaring at Mrs. Dunaway. Well, what? She shot back. Well, can your students identify the whatever in the whatever? Asked Principal Duplessis. If any of my students ever read the most exquisite first sentence in the history of novels and started picking out the coordinating conjunctions, I'd slap a pointy hat on his head and stick him in the corner for a week, retorted Mrs. Dunaway. Let me put it this way, seized the principal. Your students have been below standard on language arts for the past 4 years, yet you are their language arts teacher. If it happens again, the school board says I can fire you. He jabbed his finger at Mrs. Dunaway, but he happened to be holding the question book in his hand, which flopped onto the floor and lay there in the open doorway. I watched the pages flutter in the hallway breeze from first to last in less than a second. If I were you, the principal muttered, I'd be more worried about drilling grammar into my kids' skulls than asking Arthur about the stinking lawnmower. Erin, said Mrs. Dunaway. Wheelbarrow. Whatever, scoffed Principal Duplessis. Shape up. Brianna Bishop, said Mrs. Dunaway, stepping back into the room. I cannot wait to hear the poem you've prepared for us. Antidote of the Jar, said Brianna, by Wallace Stevens. I placed a jar in Tennessee, she began, and round it was upon a hill. A jar, muttered Principal Duplessis in disgust as he snatched the test booklet from the linoleum and stomped away. In Tennessee, for the love of Pete. But I had everything I needed to help Mrs. Dunaway, and I was going to help Mrs. Dunaway. Because when a teacher makes you recite insanely hard poems and thinks up special questions just for you, even if you don't understand what they mean, then her heart is in the right place, and you need to make sure she keeps her job. When that test booklet came fluttering past the classroom doorway and lay on the floor flapping in the breeze, my brain took a snapshot of every single page. After I got home, I looked at the snapshots again, and I picked out 3 questions I knew everybody in the class would get wrong because they were hard and because never in a million years would Mrs. Dunaway spend time teaching us stuff like this when she could be grilling us about poems. I only needed 3 because Mrs. Dunaway wasn't that far from making the grade. According to the numbers on that floor, if everybody got approximately 2.1 more answers right, then she'd get to keep her job. On Monday, as soon as the bell rang, I knocked all of Jimmy Stell's orange pencils onto the floor and stumbled around helping him pick them up. When I was sure I had the whole class's attention, I said, "Oh, by the way, Mrs. Dunaway?" "Yes, Erin," she replied. "Is a good example of a transition word A, prestidigitation, B, glimmerglass, C, moreover, or D, thoroughly? I'm pretty sure it's C, moreover. Aren't you pretty sure it's C, moreover? Mrs. Duniway was busy rummaging in her drawer for her roll book and didn't bother looking up to answer. It's moreover, Aaron, she answered, as I feel certain you already know. Think about what is Aaron doing. We talked about in class if it was okay for Aaron to be able to have a photographic memory that he could use on exams, on tests, remember? And you guys were having a conversation about whether it was cheating if he used the information from his brain or if it was okay because it was in his mind. But now he has seen every single page of the state test book. And now he knows that in order to save Mrs. Duniway's job, everybody has to do better on the test. So he's asking questions and answering them so that everybody can hear. Why might he be doing that? And is it right? That's the question. We'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow. Did you hear that, Hardy? I said. Hey, Nate and Alexander, listen up, Andrea. A good example of a transition word is see, moreover. Amazing, wow, cool. What did you know? Moreover, who would have figured? Wow. I figured if I repeated it enough times, it would sink in where it was needed most, even if not everybody was totally paying attention. It would work like hypnotism or osmosis. On Tuesday, I did the same thing, only with Stephanie's lunch and a question about passive voice constructions. The answer to that one was D, none of the above. On Wednesday, I spilled Hardy's gym bag, and while everybody watched me stuff his socks back in, I made sure that they knew that the narrative point of view of The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe was B, first person unreliable. Since I had a long history of blurting out odd facts, I don't think Mrs. Duniway thought twice about any of this, at least not at the time. On Thursday, we took the test. In front of the class, Mrs. Duniway read a novel while we worked, David Copperfield. She glanced up at me and smiled. She didn't have any idea that what I'd been doing for the past 3 days was giving away answers. Well, I told myself, I already know the answers before I ever saw the questions, so technically they were mine, right? How could it be cheating for me to give away 3 answers that I already knew? Plus, in a way, Mrs. Duniway had taught everyone the answers. I mean, she was the one who said they were correct. Am I right about this? Somebody tell me if I'm right. The classroom clock ticked. The pencils of the class scritched inside the ovals. The clocks ticked. The pencils scritched. I couldn't take it. I was not right about any of what I'd told myself. My insides collapsed. I began to visualize everything that was going to happen. I thought through all the angles I hadn't thought through before. As soon as we turned in our tests, Mrs. Duniway was going to take them to the office, where they were going to scan the results to send them to the central computer in Ames, Iowa, which would spot strangely improved scores on questions 77, 93, and 99. Investigators would immediately buy airplane tickets and, by the next morning, converge on Dolly Madison Middle School and begin pulling students out of Mrs. Duniway's room one at a time, extracting their statements, comparing notes. Soon they'd figure out that the method I'd used to give away 3 of the hardest language arts answers, and finally they'd call me in and ask me questions that would make me incriminate myself, not to mention Mrs. Duniway, Hardy Gillooly, and everybody else who'd paid attention while I was busy leaking information. Mrs. Duniway was over 18, about 50 years over 18. She'd probably go to jail. My palms got sticky. I shivered. I stood it as long as I could, then I jumped out of my seat. I did it! I cried. I ran out of the classroom, down the hallway, around the corner, and burst into Principal Duplessis' office. There sat a policeman whose name tag read, Officer Hanran. Beside him sat a colossal German Shepherd. Wow, I thought. These Central Standards guys don't waste any time. I admit it, I cried. I admit the whole thing. I tried to fix the Central Standards exam. The what? Said Officer Hanran as the dog peered at me with ears at attention. The exam, I began. Wahoo and I are just here for the SSFT assembly, said Officer Hanran. He pointed out the office window at the hallway where shrimpy sixth graders filed by on their way to the Libra Cathaginatorium. What's all this about? A Central Standards exam? What's all this about the SSFT? I asked. Summer safety fun tips, exclaimed Officer Hanrahan. As he said it, he fished a miniature tube of sunscreen out of his pocket and tossed it in the air, leaping like a trained seal. Wahoo, the dog, snatched it in his teeth. First, no matter what sort of fun you enjoy, always wear sunscreen, said Officer Hanrahan. Wahoo dropped the slobbery sunscreen in my lap, wagging his tail. In that case, I said, wiping it off, never mind. Wahoo was so well trained, he only left 3 faint tooth marks. I stuck the sunscreen in my pocket. No problem, said Officer Hanrahan, as he and Wahoo headed for the assembly. I stood up to follow, but Principal Duplessis said, Could you please stay here, Aaron? I have a few questions for you. So, the principal began, what exactly do you mean by fix? Fix, to make firm or stable, I replied, to give permanent form, to preserve from microscopic study, to make a photograph permanent. I think you meant something different, ventured the principal. To attach, I continued, to hold steady. He fixes his eyes on the horizon. To repair or mend, he fixed the broken lock. No, I don't think that's what you meant either, mused Principal Duplessis. To get even with, to influence an outcome by improper or illegal means, I continued. Oops. A prime example of something I should have previewed before I said it out loud. That sounds closer, mused the principal, rubbing his shiny head. It still wasn't clear if his hair was going to grow back. Mrs. Duniway knocked on the door. The principal must have called her before he started in on me. An ice age dawned inside my rib cage, and the glacier began to coat my spine. Are you shaking? Asked the principal. Yes, I said. Good, said the principal. Have a seat, Mrs. Duniway. I'm just finishing up your termination letter. He jotted his initials on a sheet of paper and handed it to her. Everything inside me started to sink. But I did it, I cried. But I can't fire you, said the principal, so I'm firing your teacher. I've been looking for an excuse. I need somebody new and fresh who can improve my statistics. But it was me, I repeated miserably. I saw the questions when you dropped that quiz book on the floor, and I revealed the answers to my class. Can you guys hear the lawnmower out there? Or the blower? Can you hear it? Is it very loud? It's really loud to me. I hope it's not loud to you. Maybe I'll just wait a second. It's so loud. It's like right outside my window. Oh my goodness. Is he done? No? Awesome. I could go to a different room, but Miss Matt is still, like, she's in some meetings, and so I don't want to go out there and interrupt her. And then there's also other people doing stuff outside, like in our house. Oh my goodness. I know, it's so loud. I would be surprised if you couldn't hear it, honestly. I'm trying to think, I don't know if there's anywhere else I can go. It's so loud. This is so loud. Oh my gosh. It's not quite as loud now. Can you guys like hear me over the sound of the wind, the leaf blower though? Because if you can't, I'll just keep going. Yeah? Okay, I'll just keep going. All right. I revealed the answers to the class, Mrs. Dunaway. I was only trying to help. I have to hand it to you, said Mrs. Dunaway. You failed spectacularly. I'm really, really sorry, I said. Don't be, said Mrs. Dunaway, tearing up the letter Principal Duplessis had just handed to her. As I said, it was spectacular. What do you think you're doing? Asked the principal. Going back to class, said Mrs. Dunaway, standing up and motioning to me. But you're fired, cried the principal. As for Aaron, he's suspended. I don't think so, said Mrs. Dunaway, giving the principal a stare. But he just admitted leaking answers to the Central Standards exam, bellowed the principal. That's cheating. The Central Standards Committee will not be happy. I agree, said Mrs. Dunaway. They certainly won't when they hear how Aaron got those answers, how the principal of Dolly Madison Middle School stood right in front of him and broke the seal on the test 6 days early and dropped a question book on the floor for him to see. I could almost hear the air leak out of Principal Duplessis. He turned white. He slumped in his chair. You certainly got some explaining to do for the benefit of the Central Standards Committee, observed Mrs. Dunaway. Good luck. You, stammered the principal. Bye, said Mrs. Dunaway. As Mrs. Dunaway and I walked back to class, she said, You're a smart kid, Aaron, smarter than you realize. But everything I touch turns into a disaster, I said. I think I'm actually some kind of an idiot. How can I possibly be smarter than I realize? That's the kind of question you have to figure out on your own, she said. The same way I have to figure out how much depends on a red wheelbarrow, I wondered. A lot like that, yes, replied Mrs. Dunaway, but it sounds like you already are on the right track. This could take a while, I said. It might, agreed Mrs. Dunaway. And now, one last thing. I'm afraid a parent-teacher conference is called for. Evidently, the principal made some kind of excuse and filled out a waiver and signed a form and convinced the Central Standards Committee to let Mrs. Dunaway's homeroom retake the test the following week, since we never got to finish taking it the first time due to unspecified technical difficulties. In other words, me. And believe it or not, Mrs. Dunaway's score went up 4 whole points. Mrs. Dunaway said it was because of all the adrenaline rushing through everybody's bloodstream because of the excitement I'd caused. I think she was joking, but she also told the whole class thanks for saving her job. When she said that, she sounded serious. After the parent-teacher conference, during which Mrs. Dunaway revealed pretty much the whole story, except the part about blackmailing the principal to avoid punishment, my mom and dad and I went home to discuss everything. We sat at our kitchen table, and my mom told me the same thing Mrs. Dunaway had told me. You're a smart kid. My dad snapped. You think you know everything? He was a little mad at me because of all the trouble I'd caused. Actually, so was I. I don't think I know everything, I said. I think I remember everything, but I don't know everything. Oh, son, my dad said much more softly. Suddenly he was over being mad. He put his arms around me. I realize it's hard. Mrs. Dunaway is the greatest teacher I've ever had, I explained. She was trying to teach me something important. She gave me a nutty poem. She asked me questions with no answers. She's awesome. And the principal was going to fire her because of that test. I just wanted to help her. We know your heart is in the right place, said my dad. But things have to change. You could have gotten yourself expelled. Maybe we've let you down, reflected my mom. Maybe when you memorized all 57 countries in Africa just by walking past the globe at the pediatrician's office when you were 3? 61, I corrected, including independent territories. Maybe then we should have consulted an expert, but we thought you'd outgrow it. I probably would have ended up this way no matter who you consulted, I reassured them. Your mom and I talked it over earlier, said my dad, and we did some research and conferred with the school counselor, and we think maybe you could use a change of scene, a brand new start, a blank page for the summer. What kind of place? I asked. A place where you have to think instead of just remember, said my mom. Like you said. There's a place like that? I asked. We believe so, said my dad. Where is it? I asked. We said a blank page, my dad reminded me. What are you talking about? I asked. We're not telling you where you're going, honey, sighed my mom, because what good will it do if you memorize every known fact about it before you get there? And that's the end of chapter 4. Bum, ba, bum. So, hope you guys like that. It's my favorite chapter of the book because it talks about the So Much Depends Upon poem. And we're going to talk about it tomorrow. And we're also going to talk about why doesn't Aaron understand the Red Wheelbarrow poem? And also we're going to talk about what does it mean to be normal? Because, as we have probably guessed, Audrey and Aaron aren't normal. But we're going to talk about what does it mean to be normal. But I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me read. And I think this was fun. Maybe we should do it again sometime when there isn't a leaf blower outside that's insanely loud. Yeah, and if you are just now coming in and you didn't get a chance to hear the whole thing, just go back and you can listen to the whole chapter being read. But thanks, guys. This was really fun. And thanks for taking a little bit of extra time out of your Wednesday to come and listen to chapter 4. I hope you guys liked it. Okie dokie. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.